भवत्वर्यमा शन्न इन्द्रो बृहस्पतिः शन्नो विष्णुरुक्रमः नमो ब्रह्मणे नमस्ते वायो त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्मासि त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्म वदिष्यामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्माम् अवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः यश्छन्दसा मृषभो विश्वरूपः छन्दोभ्योऽध्यमृतात् सम्बभूव समेन्द्रो मेधया आस्पृणोतु अमृतस्य देवधारणो भूयासं शरीरं मे विचर्षणं जिह्वा मे मधुमत्तमा कर्णाभ्यां भूरि विश्रुवं ब्रह्मणः कोशोऽसि मेधया पिहितः श्रुतं मे गोपाय ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः अहं वृक्षस्य रेरिव कीर्तिः पृष्ठं गिरेरिव ऊर्ध्वपवित्रो वाजिनीव स्वमृतमस्मि द्रविणगुं सवर्चसं सुमेधा अमृतोक्षितः इति त्रिशङ्कोर्वेदानुवचनम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः आप्यायन्तु मम अङ्गानि वाक्प्राणश्चक्षुः श्रोत्रमथो बलमिन्द्रियाणि च सर्वाणि सर्वं ब्रह्मा उपनिषदं माहं ब्रह्म निराकुर्यां मा ब्रह्म निराकरोत् अनिराकरणमस्तु अनिराकरणं मे अस्तु तदात्मनि निरतेय उपनिषत्सु धर्माः ते मयि सन्तु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः वाङ् मे मनसि प्रतिष्ठिता मनो मे वाचि प्रतिष्ठितम् आविराविर्म एधि वेदस्य म आनीस्थः श्रुतं मे मा प्रहासीः अनेनाधितेन अहोरात्रान् सन्दधामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्माम् अवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारमवतु वक्तारम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः भद्रं नो अपि वातयमनः ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येम अक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः यो ब्रह्माणं विदधाति पूर्वं यो वै वेदांश्च प्रहिणोति तस्मै तगुं आत्मदेव तगुं देवमात्मबुद्धिप्रकाशं मुमुक्षुर्वै शरणमहं प्रपद्ये। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः। नारायणं पद्मभुवं वसिष्ठं शक्तिं च तत्पुत्रपराशरं च व्यासं शुकं गौडपदं महान्तं गोविन्दयोगीन्द्रम् अथास्य शिष्यं श्रीशङ्कराचार्यमथास्य पद्मपादं च सहस्तामलकं च शिष्यं तं तोटकं वार्तिककारमन्यान् अस्मद्गुरून् सन्ततो मानतोऽस्मि। ॐ विश्वं दर्पणदृश्यमाननगरी तुल्यं निजान्तर्गतं पश्यन्नात्मनि मायया बहिर्बोधभूतं यथा निद्रया यत्साक्षात् कुरुते प्रबोधसमये स्वात्मानमेवाद्वयं तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः। इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये। बीजस्यान्तरिवाङ्कुरो जगदिदं प्राङ्निर्विकल्पं पुनः मायाकल्पितदेशकालकलना वैचित्र्यचित्रीकृतं मायावीव विजृम्भयत्यपि महायोगी वयस्वेच्छया तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः। इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये। यस्यैव स्फुरणं सदात्मकम् असत्कल्पार्थकं भासते साक्षात् तत्त्वमसीति वेदवचसा यो बोधयत्याश्रितान् यत्साक्षात्करणाद् भवेन्न पुनरावृत्तिर्भवाम्भोनिधौ तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः। इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये। नानाच्छिद्रघटोदरस्थितमहादीपप्रभाभास्वरं ज्ञानं यस्य तु चक्षुरादिकरणद्वारा बहिस्पन्दते जानामीति तमेव भान्तमनुभात्येतत्समस्तं जगत् तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः। इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये। देहं प्राणमपीन्द्रियानपि चलां बुद्धिं च शून्यं विदुः स्त्रीबालान्धजडोपमास्त्वहमिति भ्रान्ताभृशंवादिनः मायाशक्तिविलासकल्पितमहाव्यामोहसंहारिणे तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः। इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये। So continuing our revision of the four sutras, which are Athato Brahma Jigyasa Janmadyasya Yataha Shastrayonitvat Tattu Samanvayat. With these four sutras, we are just going to take a quick revision and maybe have some separate commentary on it, not just purely the technical derivation of the sutras as we did in the first round. We might do a little bit of that, but more of a general commentary on it. So it's interesting talking of that. The first one, as you know, we've been talking about, which is Athato Brahma Jigyasa. And Jigyasa, as we went over last time also in the last class, means a very serious inquiry, sustained inquiry, not a casual one, but something that you really want to do with all of your capabilities and so on. So we are known to that in our lives. When we want to do something that is really worthwhile, then we set about doing it, whether it's adopting a new career or finding a person to marry, whatever, different kind of things. That's the meaning of the word jigyasa. So in commenting on this word jigyasa, Swami Maheshananji made a very interesting observation. He said, it could have been that Vedavyasa, Bhagavan Vedavyasa, who is the writer of the Brahma Sutra, as well as all the Vedas and so on, really an Ishvara incarnate, and no human being can do this much. I mean, to have such facilities of the language and the thoughts and so on, not possible. It's just, it's really Ishvara, an avatara of Ishvara, Vedavyasa. So Vedavyasa, when composing the Brahma Sutra, could have started by saying, I am now going to talk about Brahman. Brahma vadishyami. Just like in many of the other sutras and other mantras that we saw. So he could have said that. But he didn't say that. Instead he said, Athato Brahma Jigyasa. So he says there is a lot of significance. Swami Maheshananji says there's a lot of significance to that. He said the significance to that is that you need to really desire to know this passionately, seriously. And the corollary to that is, and a hint to the teachers, please don't teach this to someone who doesn't qualify to do this. Do not teach this to the casual enquiry, person who does casual enquiry. Don't do it. Just reserve it for people who really demonstrate an aptitude for following this very seriously. And I remember this was something I learned this lesson. I mean, I didn't know this jigyasa thing until Swami Maheshananji had pointed this out. But in effect, I actually experienced this. I think I was telling you this a long time ago, that when I first learnt about Vedanta, and especially after the serious 2.5-year ashram study which ended in 1982, I thought this is so beautiful and so important and so not known, such a secret that I want to really share it with people. And my first target for sharing this was my own sister, who's 2.5 years older to me. She's still there in New Delhi. And her name is Lata. And I said, I couldn't wait to talk to her. And I don't remember whether, those days telephone calls were not easy to make and so on. So I think I had to wait until I met her. And I was so excited to tell her about all this. And I said, I have to tell you something, really, some secret that I have learned, which is common to all of us, and I would love to talk. To my great disappointment, she was polite. And she listened to me. But she did not really get it. And I could tell, I was disappointed at that. This was only one of them. Then after that, what I would do is I really wanted to share it with any of my friends and acquaintances and so on. And I would make it a point to uh, uh, to start a conversation which would lead to it. People will say, where were you for the last 2.5 years? And I would respond by saying, let me tell you what I'd learned. And then I found out that most of them just did not even want to pursue it. And I learned a lesson that I cannot talk it with anybody who doesn't want to listen. This is an important thing, and we will continue to discuss this today. So this is the meaning of the word jigyasa. And Swami Maheshananji says, please do not talk about it. Just if somebody says, that doesn't mean that you don't talk about it. You can bring it up. And as it will happen in many of our cases, some of the students that are listening to me, they actually just came to look at it and then they got hooked. So it's not as though you shouldn't talk about it, but don't pursue it if the person is not ready. That's all. That's all it is saying. So anyway, this is a first sutra, Athato Brahma Jigyasa. Okay, so let's continue on with the topic that we started last week, which is a very broad-based and a very important topic about how does one really go about pursuing the inquiry into the truth about who we are and so on. So there we saw just a revision about a revision that our Mahatmas say that the inquiry that one should pursue is based on the fivefold truth about the entire cosmos. And you can use the word cosmos instead of creation. Although our first series of thoughts are the entire creation. It's some kind of a creation. And the reason why we need to be careful about using the right words in our own mind, using the word cosmos rather than creation, is because if we use the word creation, immediately it begs the question, who created it? And why, more importantly, why did the person create? A very common question in all our minds, especially when you see some kind of a tragedy that occurs, like this woman who got pushed into the oncoming train in New York, one of our local person from Fremont, Jennifer Lowe or somebody, I forget her name. So the question occurs, why does it occur? Who did that? Who created this idea that, all of a sudden a life can be taken away? So those kinds of questions occur every day. Why was it created? Who created it? What is the purpose of it? This is an offshoot of our using the entire world as a creation. So I find that really, if that is the case, I personally think we should characterize the entire world, Jagat, as a cosmos. English word cosmos. And the reason for that is the following. This is an important thing for us to see. that this is the way it is, that it was never purposely created. This is the nature of the cosmos. The nature of the cosmos has 5 elements to it. Again, I'm revising it, so you already know this, but I'm revising it because it is important for us to pay attention to these factors. So the 5 factors of the cosmos are Sat, Chit and Ananda, which is the Swarupa of the cosmos. Swarupa of the cosmos is that it always is. Not necessarily in the form, but as the content of the form, it always is. And it is in the form of consciousness, jnanam, knowledge. Really no difference between consciousness and knowledge, because each one of us is always endowed with the capability, I know. I know. I am and I know. Okay, so those are the 2 factors, Sat and Chit, Satyam Jnanam. Then the 3rd factor we should know is Anantam. Anantam means one which never began and will never end. It is not a function of time. It is in fact the very basis of the time. Anantam. Again, we'll discuss it in more detail. Now, these are the 3. Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam. And the word Anantam should also be known as Ananda. Sat-Chit Ananda. Ananda means joy. So the whole creation is not just a thing. It is the nature of joy. That's exactly what we are made out of, as we will see in more detail today. So, as a word Ananda, it brings in the other 2 factors. So just listen to this. This is an important for us to really grasp and really understand this. So 3 factors are Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, or Sat-Chit Ananda. And the word Ananda has a couple of aspects to it. And those are the last 2 factors out of the 5. First 3 we have already done. The last 2 are that the nature of it is Ananda, but if you're not looking at it from the standpoint of the very nature of it, it is Anananda. It is dukkha. It is a problem. So there, before going into a lot of detail, very simply speaking, looking at Anatma is full of problems. Looking at Anatma means viewing the whole cosmos as a reality, one that determines my Ananda, is a problem. And it will never be solved. Never. You can be taking one birth after another birth after another. You can have different kinds of lives, different kind of relationships, different kinds of personalities, whatever. And this is exactly what we are doing. So you can keep doing that, and you will get some lesha, some aspects of the ananda you will be there. Otherwise, you will never do anything. So you will always have that, but the complete ananda you will not get. This is an important element in our life. Somewhere in our life we have to find this out. And the other aspect, so this is what is called Bandhanam. Bandhanam means a sense of limitation, of being imprisoned, of not being free, which is exactly what our life is. If you just examine each of our lives, it is really surprising that we don't try to free ourselves from it more frequently. We kind of accept it. The fact that I'm going to get hungry, that means I just accept it. I mean, if you look at it, hunger is a limitation. I want to be just free. I want to be just not have to be, I don't have to go to the bathroom. But we do. We eat and we have to go to the bathroom. We drink and we need to go to the bathroom. And then all the limitations of our life. It's just a lack of freedom. And so this is Bandhanam. And then it is said that on the other hand, if you look at the content of the cosmos, from where it came from, it's Ananda. So these are the 5 factors. Sat, Chit, Ananda, or Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam. And the word Anantam, or rather Ananda, has 2 aspects to it. One is Bandhanam, one is Moksha. And the difference is that if your focus is Anatma, not the self, Bandhanam. And if your focus, sustained focus, has to be a very sustained focus, and that sustained focus is on the Atma, there is eventually freedom. Here, one other interesting thing that I was really struck by. Again, a commentary from Swami Maheshananji. And so there, in fact, it's a variation on the word jigyasa. And so there he says that, so there is a Hindi word, a Sanskrit word rather, which is called vyakulata. Vyakulam or vyakulata. Vyakulata means an intense desire, kind of like jigyasa, very much, like. So jigyasa means to know. Vyakulata is a general word which says that you are without something and you can't stand it. You really want to solve it. This is called vyakulata. So if one turns towards finding the truth of life, towards God really, I mean the whole thing is, when we say that this is something we need to really grasp very clearly, that the search for the self is the search for God. There's really no difference. We just call it by different names. When we say search for God, we think about somebody who is away from us. And then the self is me. but the two are the same. What is away from me and what is me, ultimately, if I understand, is the same. So the Vyakulata could be an intense desire to be united with God. This is Vyakulata. So this Vyakulata seems to be, there is another Sanskrit word called Nishthurata. Nishthurata means, what would be the English translation for it? Means heartless, being heartless. Mean not having any compassion, lack of compassion. So, Swami Maheshananji says that it is very common and it should be understood that once you turn into a desire to know God or to desire to know the self, this is one thing, it doesn't happen right away. It doesn't happen. In fact, it gives you a certain hint. As we will go through this, the second aspect, last time we talked about Sat, today we are talking about the Sukham, Ananda, so we will go into this. But you can get a glimpse of it, but otherwise it is not graspable easily. You look like, you feel that the God that you are pursuing is making things very difficult for you. This is the Nishthurata, means you're heartless. Hey, I want something. And how is it that I'm not able to get it? So on this one, Swami Maheshananji gave a very beautiful example. He said, imagine a young couple who got married. And for in most cases, very, very rare is the exception, although in the Western society this is becoming less of an exception, where people want to get married but not have children. That's the exception. But almost everybody in the world, certainly in the country that we came from, in India, the reason you get married is to have children. So there's a young couple that they got married and now they are away, and this is what happens all the time. Once you get married, then after 9 months or so, then the parents of both of them start bugging you. Hey, don't you want to have children? How come you're not having any children? And even if the couple says, we want to have children, but let's just wanted to take it easy. Let's just have a life without children for a while. That's very possible. Eventually, all the young people also want to have children. Suppose they cannot have children for some reason or the other. They've been wanting to have children, but they cannot get it. Okay? So now what happens is that the couple, it really becomes really devoid of the child, and the more they want it, they are not able to get it, and they want to compete, they want to pursue doing it either naturally or through in vitro or whatever, all these new things that have now come up, and they spend money, they look into it, and so on and so forth. Swami Maheshananji says, look, and eventually, hopefully, in most cases, they will be successful, either through patience or through some advice or through some medical things, some technology, whatever it is, they are able to have it. But they really intensely pursued it. So Swami Maheshananji says, look, there is a very good lesson on this. When you do not have a child, you don't look upon the child as being heartless. Hey, how come you're not coming to us? He says, don't you like us? We want to have you, child. Oh, child, please come to us. And you are heartless. You don't have that feeling. The feeling you have is that I want the child and I want to know how to get it. And with my patience and our patience, we should be able to get, both of us should be able to get a child. So here is the result of this. Swami Maheshananji says that our life of the pursuit of God, the pursuit of the self, is exactly like that. Because you have a possibility that has already been given to you. Before that, I didn't even know that was possible. So now the possibility is there. So similarly, like a man and a woman, once they have a sexual union, it is very possible that they will have a child. Similarly, if Vedanta comes in and says, yes, it's possible that you will be completely free. Once you understand God, once you understand yourself and the non-difference between them, you will be devoid of any problems in your life. It's very possible. But then you have to pursue it. And you have to pursue it with vyakulata. This is the word jigyasa. Vyakulata means you have to really pursue it seriously with all of your passion and all of your attention. And there you should not say the Ishvara, God, is heartless. Just like you will not say that the child is heartless. Why doesn't he come? Similarly, you should not have a feeling that the God is heartless. The God wants you to really also know. It just means that your intense desire should be translated into the right amount of work involved. Your eligibility, the improvement of your understanding. This is what is the Antakarana Shuddhi is. So he says, keep doing it. Keep doing it because, and in fact, he makes a point. It's a very interesting point. Swami Maheshananji. And others, not just him. I mean, all he does is to echo what the prevailing wisdom of the Shastra is. And he says that really all the dukkha that you get is a further instigation for you to keep looking for an answer. Because if you do not get problems, you will get so complacent in simply adopting a life of limitation that you will not go for a non-limitation. Beautiful point. And so really every time there is some dukkha in your life, either caused by a human being or natural, whatever it is, those are the three kind of shantis that we have. Shanti, shanti, shanti. Oh, so adhyatmikam, adi bhutam or adi daivam. Either one of them. Any time you have a dukkha, you need to renew your efforts to get a permanent relief from dukkha. And that happens by jigyasa. This is the significance of the word jigyasa. Jigyasa means an intense desire to know. How can I be free? So there, now we go back to our main discussion that we started last week. And that is, you have to look at it very significantly with care. So the first thing that we saw was that the hints are given to you, but you have to translate the hint into its implementation. If you don't get the hint, then you have to wait for some other time before you get the hint. It's interesting, there's a story about Narada. So Narada is known in our Puranas as a very accomplished rishi, accomplished wise person, Mahatma. And there's so many stories about Narada. So one story is that he was born as a very devout person in a very devout family. Had a lot of shraddha towards the knowledge and so on, but he had not yet gotten the knowledge of the self. He had not really met Ishvara, had not seen, did not have the Sakshat Karanam. And so he had a mother that he was serving. And the mother was getting old, and then finally she got very sick, and then she finally died. And as a son, a very devoted son, even though he wanted to really study and to pursue the study, his first priority was taking care of his mother. And so he did that. So his mother, he always was praying to Vishnu, Lord Vishnu, and saying, I want to really get to know you. But the answer always was, and in his not directly, but he was hints given was, your job is to take care of your mother. And so he did that. So he postponed the inquiry until he was fully engaged in taking care of his mother, and his mother died. And then he became free of that responsibility, and he just decided to really put all of his efforts into learning. And then he got very frustrated because he was not getting a darshanam of the Lord that he had been seeking. And so what happened was that he recounts it later in his in Narada. So this is what the Purana is. The Narada recounts it later that God visited him a few times, but I did not recognize him. So he says that there were a few instances, for example, where somebody wanted my help, and I ignored it. I said, no. He said, I'm very busy at this moment, or please don't bother me. That was the God that was testing him to see whether he has selflessness, whether he could have a sense of community, of being helping to the others, and having sensitivity to a person who really wants his help. He didn't. And so he would go away. Slowly, the hints from Vishnu came to him and saying, I have visited you a couple of times with a different costume, but you did not recognize me. And I will continue to do so until you recognize me. And so then his intense desire, his jigyasa took over. And he says, I'm sorry, I really want to know this. Next time something like this happens, I will see you. And slowly his mind became softer, his kindness became more real, his mind became purer, and he could see the presence of Ishvara at all times, not just once in a while. Wherever he would see nothing but Ishvara alone. So this is the example that is given in the Puranas regarding Narada. So, but it required a sustained inquiry. And even though he had a glimpse of it, but to turn the glimpse into something which is permanent, it requires a lot of preparation on his mind. So this is really the meaning of the word jigyasa. So now let us look into some aspects of jigyasa. One of them we saw last week, which is hints are given to you. See, the whole idea that I'm pursuing is that we are given the hints, but we ignore it. How? We saw this last week regarding the word Sat. That I am. So there what happens is that you see the world as Vinashi. Vinashi means one which is destructible, which is continuously destroyed. Coming, going. There's no finality to it and so on. This is what the world is. So one of the steps we have to do is to recognize that as a phenomena. See, this is where the viveka comes in. So viveka and vairagya, the two basic aspects of all this. Because as we first grow up as a child, you're not aware of the fact that things are changing. Even though they are changing, and you see that is all part of life. Of course it has to be changing. If there is hunger, then there is a cessation, you eat, it's a change. So it's okay, this is the way things are. But then, and by the way, you can go through the entire life not taking the next step. Okay? And this is exactly what happens. In 99% of the cases, you don't really inquire into it. But suppose something happens, some dukkha in your life, some dissatisfaction, some desire to improve yourself and so on. And more importantly, I tell you what happens is that you come across wisdom that seems to strike a chord in you. You may not you may be getting ready for it, but you don't figure it out yourself. But when someone says something and he says, yes. So there the next step is to recognize the destructive nature of your experiences, the vinashita. Everything is just changing. Okay. The step after that is even more important. And that is that as you see the destructiveness, the vinashita, destructiveness is not the right translation. The vinashita means one which is nature of being destroyed. So destructive means that there is something that causes destruction. So that's not the right translation. But one which is non-constant, which just is not reliable. It keeps changing. I think let's just say it's changing. So the next step is that you look at the changingness of the world, and the same wisdom that points it out also points out that, see, there is someone who is not changing. This is the interesting thing. The whole thing is changing. And the only way to know that the whole thing is changing is to know that there is something that doesn't change. Who is that? You? I? Yes. Because as we saw in the last few classes, even all that fundamentally we cannot have a life that makes sense unless there is something that doesn't change. So a very simple thing we saw was that even making a statement saying, when I was young, you cannot make the statement until you were the one who was young and you are the one who was no longer young. So you are the same person. See, this should be understood. So along with the changingness of the world, the next step to that is, the corollary to that is, there is something that doesn't change. Okay? Then the next one is, well, I don't seem to change while I'm alive. But I was not always alive. And therefore I may not always stay alive. Of course I will not. So this non-changingness is a very interesting one, that all of a sudden I have a non-changingness and all of a sudden the non-changingness disappears in me. Something is not right to me. That doesn't feel right to me. And that is the reason I don't inquiring into the non-changingness, because the non-changingness also abruptly goes. This is me. This is the human being. So I get it that I am unchanging while I'm alive, but that doesn't make any difference to me, because I feel that I'm going to subject to die. So what? This is where the hints of the non-changingness has to be translated into a full experience of non-changingness. Hints are given to me, but the hints have to be translated into something which is no longer a hint, it's a direct experience. And that bleeds into the second sutra, Janmadhyasya Yataha, which we will do not today, next time. But it means, so you see, this is the thing we have to see. So there is if you look at from a technical standpoint, the satyatvam, the ability to not change, is what is called apekshika satyatvam. Apekshika satyatva means relative non-changing. Isn't it? It is relative non-changing. It is non-changing with respect to the world which I experience, which is changing. But it is not absolutely unchanging. It is not paramarthika satyatvam. It's not paramarthika sat. Not absolutely sat. Why not? Because I had a beginning and I'm going to end. So my understanding of the sat is apekshika sat, not paramarthika sat. You can even say vyavaharika sat. Transactionally, yes, I'm the same person. This is exactly what happens in our life. That unless you have some stability as a person, people cannot transact with you. Nobody will call you and say hi because you are a different person. You met somebody last week and now that person has disappeared. No, it's the same person. So from a transactional point of view also, you have certain stability, non-changingness, not stability, but non-changingness. That much I understand. What I am really interested in is not apekshika satyatvam, but paramarthika satyatvam. So there, the jigyasa needs to be translated into yes, there is paramarthika satyatvam. And where is the paramarthika satyatvam? It is in Brahman. So where is Brahman? And what is the nature of Brahman? What is the lakshana of Brahman? Which is now given in the second sutra, which is janmadyasya yataha. And then it is pointed out that, see, if it is paramarthika satyatvam, then it must be you. What? Because I am only apekshika satyatvam. No. You are the paramarthika satyatvam because if you are seeking, if you want to know paramarthika satyatvam, then don't you understand that it must be you already? Because otherwise it will not be paramarthika satyatvam. If it is not you now, it's not paramarthika. So these are the step by step. We have to say that really, first of all, so the steps are, you have to look at the non-changing nature, the changing nature of the world. Then you have to say that the changing nature of the world is only possible because of the non-changingness of myself, and the non-changing of yourself is not apekshika, but it is paramarthika. These are the steps that one has to go through. But it's only possible if I have jigyasa. Jnana means a serious, otherwise this is exactly what happens. You read some kind of a book and it's just like the New York Times bestseller list. Oh my gosh, these are beautiful books. That is a very nice book. Some new age person, Eckhart, Tolbert, or whatever their names are, I don't know. They have come up with this new insight into what it should be, how we should do that. And have you read this book? And you read it in the book club and so on. And then you set it aside. And you go around, on the world. This is too casual. This is not jigyasa. It should just get hold of you to a point where the rest of the life is just nothing but a transformation of that hint. That's what happened to me. I mean, I cannot believe, I just thank Ishvara that as soon as I heard this from Swami Chinmayananji, it was no longer reading a book or anything like this. I said, oh my goodness. I don't know how that happened. Something happened, but it was very clear to me that this is Satyatvam for me. But it was a hint. Hint in the sense that intense vision of the fact that, my goodness, this is me, I cannot believe this, was not sustained. But you know what? Doesn't matter. Because once it was given to me, I knew it is there. I have to make it into a reality. And the rest of the life, I never forgot that, even now. And it's very possible that you may not be that fortunate. It's very possible you may be fortunate. I don't know. One thing I will tell you is that it doesn't have to be that intense a feeling that I had. It doesn't have to be that. But what I would say is that if in attending any of the classes, your mind becomes still and you have a feeling of joy, that's enough. That's enough for you to inquire into. You see, that's exactly right. I am not Swami Chinmayanand and we did not meet in person. So it's very possible you do not have the same, or you may have it, I don't know. But doesn't matter. On a relative level, if you find some joy, some stillness of the mind, that needs to be sustained, inquired into, and you're doing it. This is what jigyasa means. Because it's very possible that may not happen. In which case we can go through our lives knocking around with problems and so on and so forth. But if you can translate that hint, and you should, into a sustained inquiry that becomes a reality, your life is fullness. So this is what happens on the sat aspect of it. So now we can say the same thing can happen on the second. Let's look at the next. Another aspect of this, which is a sense of joy. So you see, the hint about Satyatvam means that somebody should reveal to you, are you not the same while the world is changing? And you should see that is the truth. The same thing is true for, are you not aware of the fact, aware of the fact that your nature is joyful? So I said, what? Yes. The hints are there for all to see, but we don't notice the hint. So now let us look at the aspect of joy, Ananda, not Sat, for a minute. Can we not tell that our nature is joy, sukha? Can we not tell? We should be able to tell. How? We expect everybody to be joyful, including myself. If something is bothering me, I cannot stand it. If nothing is bothering me, I don't do anything. If something is causing some issue with me, I try to resolve it. If I see a person sitting quietly, content in whatever that person is doing, that seems okay with me. If I see a person crying, or in any other way disturbed, I ask the person, what's wrong? I don't react to a joyful person unless the person is laughing uncontrollably. Then we can say, what is the joke? Or why are you laughing? What did you see? But to see a peaceful, quiet, satisfied person is very natural to me. And the same thing is not only see someone else, but even myself. To be a quiet, peaceful person. I don't want to change it. I just want to stay with as it is. Is it not very clear from this that our nature is joy? It should be. Just like it should be clear to us that through the changing world I am unchanging, it should be equally clear that amongst all possibilities of joylessness, what is my own nature is joyfulness. This is a hint that I have to develop. I don't take that hint. I don't take that hint because I am so impatient to be joyful that I don't inquire into the nature of how joy is and how to sustain it. I'm so impatient. Just those two examples are very similar. Just like I am not capable of sustaining the fact that I am unchanging. I ignore that fact that I am unchanging. Similarly, I ignore the fact that I am joyful, that my nature is joyful, until I inquire into it. Oh my God, you are right. This is jigyasa. Because you ask somebody, did you know that your nature is joyful? They'll say, ha 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 ha. Don't joke on me. I've got so many problems. They know. And this nature of joyfulness becomes very manifest when you do not disturb it in any way. That's another, You want to see all of the evidence for this hint. They're all over the place. Whenever there's no disturbing factor, you're immediately joyful. Deep sleep. Otherwise, if there was nothing going on, no transactions and so on, if you are not joyful, you will have a terrible recollection. Terrible recollection, because you will not want to go to sleep. Just see that logic of this. Follow the logic. The logic is that if the joy would consist of living actively only, it can only be sustained by some transaction, winning, and so on, you would never go to sleep. Never go to sleep. But you do. So that means it's just the opposite. That the variation of joy during the day is an interruption on your joyfulness. Isn't it? This is a very strong hint. And yes, I am sympathetic to anyone who says, then how come I am not joyful? We have to look into all of those aspects. But all I'm saying is that we should now inquire into the hints of those two things. That I am by nature joyful. Everyone, not just me. It's a very funny thing that by nature we are joyful, but we have put some kind of a curtain on top of us where we don't see that all the time. So this is what the whole inquiry is all about. And also the same thing is true for knowledge. Chit. Because I find that I want to be a knowledgeable person. This is a very natural thing. So this is the interesting thing is that all the three aspects that I am, I have a wrong notion that all three of them are not true. How? The three basic things, Sat, Chit and Ananda, I am, but all three of them I have confusion over. In fact, I have a complete negation of all three of them. How? Take Sat. Sat means that I am basically the nature of freedom from time. Always been there. It's not like I'm in time. I am the very nature of beingness. But I take myself to be temporary. I'm only here for a few years and then I'm going to disappear. So there right away, that one I have a confusion over. Then the next one is Ananda. That my nature is Ananda, but I don't feel that. Then the next thing is knowledge. I want to be a completely knowledgeable person. I must know everything that is going on. I cannot stand not knowing. Cannot stand. Swami Dayananji, I think, once gave an example. He says, if you want to test this, he says, don't do it. It's kind of cruel. But supposing you want to test the fact that you want to be knowledgeable and you never want to not know anything, do the following. Okay? So you and your spouse are ready to turns the light down and go to sleep, and you're lying in bed, and then you turn to your spouse, then you say, "Oh honey, I forgot to tell you this. Our friend," and she says, "Yes." "Oh my God, I found out something that the person did which will really be ruining his life." She says, "What?" Or he says, I'm just taking one side or the other. "What did he do?" "Well, that I would not tell you because, I just want to go to sleep right now. And I will tell you about that tomorrow." If she believes, and you say this very sincerely, if she believes or he believes, whoever you're talking to, that this is the truth, they'll say, no, tell me now. I can't go to sleep until you... No, just go to sleep because, I'm kind of sleepy. And I want to go to sleep, and I'll tell you that tomorrow morning after breakfast. That person is going to switch the lights on, sit up in bed and say, "If you don't tell it to me right now, I am walking out." So that means that we cannot stand not knowing. We must know everything that is possible to know. And we do, but we don't know it. How this will be done and how do we know? I think it's pretty clear to you, but I will go over this in more detail on that aspect of it. So anyway, these are the three fundamental aspects that we have a confusion on, and furthermore, it's exacerbated by the fact that if we're not looking at the right place, we'll never find it. So Bandhanam is the looking at Anatma, and freedom, moksha, is looking at the Atma, which is nothing but Ishvara alone. So this is the inquiry, and this is what is called Athato Brahma Jigyasa. So we'll pursue that. There's more to be said about all this, and we will pursue that over to the second sutra. I think next week we will, and that'll go a lot faster. So we will do that. So let's finish the prayer, and then we will close the class. Om Rahu Grasta Divankarendu Sadrisho Maya Samachhadanat Sanmatra Karanopasamharanato Yo Bhut Sushuptaf Puman Pragaswap Samiti Prabodha Samaye Yav Patyabhigyayate Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namaitam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Balyadishu api jagradadishu tatha sarvasvavasthasvapi vyavrittasvanuvartamanam ahamityantaspurantam sada swatmanam prakatikaroti bhajatam yo mudraya bhadraya tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye namaidam Shri Dakshina Murtaye Vishwam Pashyati Karyakaranataya Swaswami Sambandhataha Shishyacharyataya Tathaiva Pitra Putradhyatmana Bhedataha स्वप्ने जागृति वाय एष पुरुषो माया परिभ्रामितः तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये भूरम्भांस्य नलो निलो अम्बरमहर्नार्थो हिमांशुः पुमान् इत्याभाति चराचरात्मकमिदं यस्यैव मूर्त्यष्टकम् नान्यत् किञ्चन विद्यते विमृशतां यस्मात् परस्मात् विभोः तस्मै श्रीगुरुमूर्तये नमः इदं श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये सर्वात्मत्वमिति स्फुटीकृतमिदं यस्मादमुष्मिंस्तवे तेनास्य श्रवणात् तदर्थमननात् ध्यानात् च संकीर्तनात् सर्वात्मत्वमहाविभूतिसहितं स्यादीश्वरत्वं स्वतः सिद्ध्येतत्पुनरष्टधा परिणतं चैश्वर्यमव्याहतम् अशुभानि निराचष्टे तनोति शुभसन्ततिं स्मृतिमात्रेण यत्पुंसां ब्रह्मतन्मङ्गलं परम् अतिकल्याणरूपत्वात् नित्यकल्याणसंश्रयात् स्मर्तॄणां वरदत्वात् च ब्रह्मतन्मङ्गलं विदुः ओङ्कारश्चार्थशब्दश्च द्वावेतौ ब्रह्मणः पुरा कण्ठं भित्त्वा विनिर्यातौ तस्मान्माङ्गलिकौ वुभौ ओमथ असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमय ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः हरिः ॐ श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः हरिः ॐ So nice to see you all. Wonderful. Great that you had a chance to take the morning and listen to all this. And I really appreciate it. So wonderful. Keshav, yeah, it's interesting. You know, it's interesting that once you have, it's remarkable, honestly, because I remember when I was working for IBM and I had just started, and I wanted to improve my memory, and my memory is not the greatest. I keep forgetting things and so on, and I used to see how to improve my memory. And there was one thing that I really learned, which was really wonderful, which says the art of memory is the art of attention. You have to really know the attention. And from that standpoint, the listening to the Swamis became very natural for me because it was so revealing to me, so impressive that the attention was never a problem. And so therefore memory is never a problem as far as my teaching of the things are concerned. But other things where I'm much more casual, I cannot put attention on everything, I keep forgetting. So anyway, that's the reason for it. But you are right, it is a wonderful thing that I can even picture Swami Dayananji, where he was sitting when he said that. All of that is just embedded in my mind. And the same thing is true when I read Swami Maheshananji, who I had never met. I'm very my misfortune that I never really had a chance to meet with him. Swami Viditatmananda has met him, but I have never. But I do read his books a lot, and I have a very good memory. Again, when I'm reading, my attention is crisp, and nothing else distracts me, and I can almost tell where he said something. Not always, because in Panchadashi and so on, it's a huge 5 books. So I know that he said something, but which chapter he said it in sometimes is not clear. Anyway. Could you please expound on Nishtulata? Yes. So Zarina, what that was saying was, by the way, just on the side, I'm reading a book for the second or third time, written by Swami Maheshananji, which says Jnana, what is it called? Is it? I forget the name of it. It's a remarkable book on seeing how our attitude in life can be transformed by knowledge. Maybe I'll discuss that some other time. I don't know when we will have chance to discuss it, this particular book. But just to give you an idea, if you find, this is also discussed in that particular book, this Nishthurita that you are asking about. The Nishthurita means if there is someone who's giving you a problem, if something is causing you a problem, the best thing is to understand there is a reason why that problem is being given to you. It is actually the kindness of Ishvara that problem is being given to you. I know so many cases, honestly, this is so sad, where people have ignored some body problems that they've had for a while and never took action until it became very late. And this is part of that. So Nishthurata here means, heartlessness means that if there is and I'm just giving you a quick summary of this, we need to discuss it more. If there is some kind of a problem which is not going away and is persistent, then you need to really look into it to see why that is the case. And instead of what we do is we blame someone and say, I wish that person would change and not give me this problem. When in fact the problem was specifically given to you with the full knowledge of Ishvara that you need to look into that to change yourself. It's that line of enquiry about the Nishthurata. And so similarly, for example, we talked about the couple not having a child. That means that you not deserve the child at this point, but you need to take some steps possibly. It's very possible you may not get one. There is a separate case there. But that is the general thing that Nishthurata means, that it is really transforming the obvious nature of the problem into something much more significant, which for self-improvement. That's the, it's called Jnana Ankusham. Jnana Ankusham. Beautiful book. Has lots of verses in it on how you transform your attitude from one which is causing problems into something which becomes very beneficial to you. So this is a book by Swami Maheswaranji, and then I will hopefully have enough time to discuss that. Okay, I don't know if there's any other questions, but I think we're running out of time anyway, so thank you, and I will see you next week. Hari Om.